We're in Burma, where historic drama has just unfolded. Let me set the scene for you a little bit. Like in any country, the fight over the throne has been tough.
Sound is good.
Umi Edda is good.
In fact, the fight is still ongoing as we speak.
Okay. Could you look me in the eye, please?
Yes. Like in many countries, the road towards democracy has been long. But nowhere has a dream turned so fatally into a tragedy as in Burma. But we don't know that yet. Before the tragedy, there was hope. Before that, it all began with a woman and a military.
A lot of people in downtown, they take to the street, holding whatever weapon available. I can hear some gunshots now coming from downtown. I think most probably it is taking place in front of the city hall.
On the 8th day of the 8th month in '88, the military violently cracked down an uprising by the people.
What we want the military to do is to keep out of politics. We don't want the military to split up. We want the armed forces to keep together, but to keep out of politics.
The military put Aung San Suu Kyi in house arrest and kept her there for nearly 20 years. One day the military announced that they were ready to step down from power and make real democracy. They had made a 7-step roadmap to follow.
The 7-step roadmap.
The plan was enshrined in what was to become their most sacred book, the Constitution. After decades of hard power, it looked like the military was ready to exchange the uniforms for suits and the swords for words.
You know, the roadmap is very important for our country. Transformation of the country into a democratic state. We have to take step by step, systematically. There's a 7-step roadmap which was announced by our Prime Minister on the 30th of August, and now we are implementing this roadmap.
And the release of Miss Suu Kyi, will it come very soon?
But everything is, we are working for the best.
Thank you very much.
They did release her, but under their conditions. They had put a clause in the Constitution that specifically barred her from ever becoming Burma's president.
The Burmese pro-democracy leader Aung San Suu Kyi has been released by the country's military rulers.
The moment that many thousands of Burmese people had been waiting for years. Aung San Suu Kyi, a free woman, she waved and smiled at the thousands who'd gathered to witness this historic moment.
As I said earlier, I haven't discussed the matter of foreign travel. Actually, I have no plans to travel abroad at the moment. Let me get around Burma first.
On the 11th day of the 11th month, 1,100 battalions were sent to the driest part of the country to inaugurate a new capital with a new parliament. In 2011, the military installed a so-called civilian government. They had promised the people democracy, and so they would get.
Tamro Boma Tamro Nale people Luabare Tamro Namle Lucien Tamro Joe Mati and Tamro Namle Tamro Sole Lubeti Minama Pipare.
Ratangu Ashes Shipunema Picare, Yekini Pianji, Happy Pizuriale, democracy go lolare, Conalsanari Shini, Saratia. Those are the time you democracy go Piamo, Tamara, send them a ship. To my Bama, the democracy to Luada, Chigani Bama to solve with the machine.
The Yamalo, time you tinny on any chain of that, the Lumatain thing I time Pia, a colo, council, game as on it.
Don't know Tamro Sorelu, Mimamau, Palomamilaso, Tamroa, to Lotin, locate Loti, to Lonibare, a Tiga here to Yoda, Nangayaki Sari to Lote. Now security, Lonoe Kesario to Tiga Halote. Aung San Suu Kyi Myanmar Nangaye Nangaye Chinine Kanyi Mumshira to Tuyavare. Jammu Tamro Lemakan in Pipare.
The most prominent of the military generals took off their green military uniforms and put on the white civilian outfits. Many generals stayed in uniform, but the country was now to be governed by the leaders in white.
As well as Sua, Chica Legend of Pine. But you know, for them, Pawena, Wingiria, in Temple, Sua Latadua, Wingi the Chuba. Jane, Lunganina Patavido, look at Kanga Buddha, Twitching Shida to the Pavare. Dine, democracy, Balu Pianoyame, Hari Pianoyame, Rajano Lemativu, Turu Lemativu, Vajolas or democracy in a King Kwana, Joran, Bongaza, Jolajano Shinibi.
Institutions those days, are they in line with the military regime? We have no idea about how to rebuild the institutions. That is very difficult. Then we are thinking that, that is so difficult with the military regime and democratic government is so different, 180 degrees out of phase. From the top to the bottom, obey the order. That is a different style.
2010နောက်ပိုင်းမှာတော့ကျွန်တော်ကဦးသိန်းစိန်ဆိုရလက်ထက်မှာတော့ဦးသိန်းစိန်ကနေကျွန်တော်ကို political reform ဆိုတဲ့တာဝန်ပေးပါတယ်အဲ့ဒီအချိန်မှာကျွန်တော်ကဒီ democracy အသွင်ကူးပြောင်းရေးကိုကျွန်တော်ကထဲထဲဝင်ဝင်ဆောင်ရွက်ခဲ့ရပါတယ် democracy စနစ်တည်တာပြည်သူ democracy စနစ်ဆိုတာဟာပြည်သူရှိရလာတာဖြစ်တယ်ပြည်သူကိုဦးစားပေးရမယ်ပြည်သူဆုံးဖြတ်တဲ့အတိုင်းအစိုးရကမှားသည်ဖြစ်စေမှန်သည်ဖြစ်စေလုပ်ပေးရမယ်ဆိုပြီးတော့ကျွန်တော်ဒီလိုပဲဆုံးဖြတ်ပါတယ်
2010အရှိပိုင်းမှာအကြမ်းမြင့်ချုပ်ပြီးတော့ပြောရင်ကျွန်တော်တို့တိုင်းပြည်ကစစ်အာဏာရှင်တွေပဲတိုင်းပြည်မှာအုပ်ချုပ်ခဲ့တယ်စစ်အာဏာရှင်တွေပဲအုပ်ချုပ်ခဲ့တဲ့ခါကျတော့သူတို့ကိုယ်တိုင်လည်းနောက်ဆုံးမှသူတို့သိတယ်အဲ့ဒါဘာလဲဆိုတော့တိုင်းပြည်မှာဆင်းရဲမွဲတေမှုတွေဖြစ်တယ်အောင်မြင်မှုမရဘူးအနောက်နိုင်ငံတွေကပိတ်ဆို့မှုတွေရှိတယ်ပြဿနာတွေအမျိုးမျိုးကြုံရတယ်တတိပြုမိလာပြီးတဲ့ခါကျတော့2008ခုနှစ်မှာသူတို့ဖွဲ့စည်းပုံအခြေခံဥပဒေတစ်ခုကိုသူတို့ကရေးတဲ့ခါကျတော့အဲ့ဒီဖွဲ့စည်းပုံအခြေခံဥပဒေအရတိုင်းပြည်ကိုဒီမိုကရေစီနိုင်ငံသွားဖို့ပါညာဒီလိုပုံစံမျိုးမဟုတ်ဘူးအဲ့လိုပုံစံမျိုးမဟုတ်ဘဲနဲ့တပ်မတော်ကပဲဆက်ပြီးတော့မှဒီတိုင်းပြည်ကိုဆက်အုပ်ချုပ်သွားမယ်ဒါပေမဲ့ပြောင်းလဲမှုတွေလုပ်မယ်အနောက်နိုင်ငံနဲ့ဆက်ဆံရေးတွေကောင်းအောင်လုပ်မယ်
If we think back to the situation even in the early 90s this was a country which had sanctions itself, isolated itself, a military regime that had isolated itself and was in some ways quite happy in isolation for a quarter century. If they really wanted to reform the bureaucracy, to change mindsets, to change mentalities, they needed help and exposure to the West and the international community, help from the international financial institutions like the World Bank, the IMF and ADB. And so because the government had a very different agenda than the military regime before, lifting sanctions suddenly became a priority.
Hello. ဒီတက်မတော်အုပ်ချုပ်တဲ့လူတွေရဲ့ခံယူချက်ကလည်းကမ္ဘာပေါ်မှာတက်မတော်အစိုးရဆိုတာက international community ကလက်မခံတဲ့အတွက်ကြောင့်အမြဲတမ်းလွှဲပြောင်းပေးဖို့အတွက်အစဉ်သင့်ဖြစ်အောင်ကြိုးစားခဲ့တယ်
For your Western country point of view, military coup and the military play important role in the politics, you cannot accept that. The military have clearly understand. For the sake of our country, military cannot involve in the politics for long term.
တိုင်းပြည်စီးပွားရေးဖွံ့ဖြိုးတိုးတက်ဖို့တော့ကျွန်တော်ကအရင်းနှီးမရှိဘူး။ဤပညာကျွန်တော်နောက်ကျတယ်။ဘာကြောင့်ဆို20လောက်ကျွန်တော်အပိတ်ခံတာဆက်ဆံရေးတွေပြည်လည်အောင်ကျွန်တော်စူးစမ်းတယ်။အရှေ့ရောခုနကလိုအာရှရောခုနလိုအနောက်ဘက်ကော even American solution American သမ္မတမြန်မာနိုင်ငံမှာတခါမှမလာဘူးပါဘူး။တွေ့ရတော့မြန်မာနိုင်ငံအကြောင်းအခြေအနေမှန်တွေကိုကျွန်တော်ကိုယ်တိုင်သူတို့ကိုရှင်းပြတယ်။မသိတဲ့လူတွေကများပါတယ်။ဒီမိုကရေစီစနစ်ကိုကျွန်တော်ပြောင်းနေပြီ။ခင်ဗျားတို့ဒီမိုကရေစီစနစ်ကိုလိုလားတယ်မို့လား။လိုလားတယ်ဆိုရင်တော့ကျွန်တော်တို့ကိုခင်ဗျားဝိုင်းပြီးတော့အထောက်အကူပေးဖို့တော့လိုတယ်။ဒီဟာတွေပိတ်ဆို့ထားတဲ့ကြောင့်ကျွန်တော်တို့ကခုနကလောင်းရင်မိနေတယ်
We've always said that the best way to get sanctions lifted in Burma is to meet the conditions that were set by the Congress when sanctions were imposed. For example, the release of political prisoners, negotiations with the democratic opposition, humanitarian access to conflict areas, and so on. So if these conditions are met, then the time will certainly have come for sanctions to be relaxed. အကြောင်းအမျိုးမျိုးနဲ့ခုနလိုထောင်ကျနေတာတွေအချုပ်ထဲရောက်နေတာတွေဒါတွေကအများကြီးရှိနေတယ်
ဒီလူတွေကကိုယ်နိုင်ငံသားတွေဖြစ်နေတယ်ဒီမိုကရေစီကိုလိုလားလို့တချို့လဲစူးကြပူကြရင်းနဲ့ဒီလိုတွေဖြစ်တာတွေရှိတယ်
အများကြီးကျွန်တော်တို့အကျဉ်းသားတွေလွတ်ခဲ့တာကျွန်တော်ပဲလို့
So he's also like the responsible person.
ဘယ်သူမှမလုပ်ရဘူးကျွန်တော်လုပ်လာတာလို့
ကျွန်တော်ထင်တယ်28,000ကျော်လောက်ရှိမှထင်တယ်နိုင်ငံခြားမှာကြောင်းစိုးရင်ပြီးတော့ထွက်ပြေးနေတဲ့လူတွေလည်းကျွန်တော်ပြန်ပြီးတော့ခေါ်ပါတယ်
ဒီနေ့က1988တုန်းကတောခိုသွားတဲ့လူတွေပြည်ပကိုထွက်သွားတဲ့လူတွေကထဲဗမာပြည်ကိုအများကြီးပြန်လာနိုင်ခဲ့တယ်ကျွန်တော်လုပ်ပေးခဲ့လို့ကျွန်တော်လည်းကြိုက်တာမကြိုက်တာဖိတ်ချိတ်လူပဲကျွန်တော် blacklist ထားတဲ့လူတွေအများကြီးဖယ်ပလိုက်တယ်
In the last 20 years, we live under the very strong session, politically or diplomatically or economically. The president understands that without the participation of the Aung San Suu Kyi into the political process, we cannot reintegrate with the international community.
တော့တမလို့ဆိုအလုံးလုံးလို့မရအောင်စူးစူးပူပူနဲ့ဖြစ်အောင်အများအားလုပ်နေတာရှိတယ်စူးစူးပူပူနဲ့ဖြစ်နေလို့ရှင်တော့နိုင်ငံကြီးမှာတည်တည်ငြိမ်နဲ့လုပ်လို့ရမှာမဟုတ်ဘူးတော့နိုင်ငံကြီးကိုတည်ငြိမ်အောင်ခုနကတော့လုပ်ရမယ်
ကျွန်တော်ကတမရနဲ့ဒေါ်အောင်ဆန်းစုကြည်တွေ့ပြီးတာ2011 19 August မှာ
ကြားပြရွေးကောက်ပွဲမှာဝင်နိုင်ဖို့အတွက်ကျွန်တော်တို့ဥပဒေတွေတချို့ပြင်ပေးတာတွေရှိပါတယ်သူဆန္ဒကလည်းလွှတ်တော်ရရောက်လာတော့လွှတ်တော်နိုင်ငံရေးကိုသူကလုပ်ရတာလွှတ်တော်ဆိုတော့စီမင်းစည်းကမ်းနဲ့သူကလောက်ရပြီးတော့တာဖြစ်တဲ့တရောအပြင်မှာဆန္ဒတွေထွက်ပြီးတော့ပြလို့ကလည်းမရဘူး
So this is where it all began. They had invited her in, and she had accepted the invitation and participated in the by-elections. The elections were symbolic, and the stakes were small. With only 10% of seats contested, it brought with it little power. But it raised a hope for the general elections the leaders had promised in 2015.
When the president made the decision to meet the Aung San Suu Kyi, most party members are suspicious of the Aung San Suu Kyi. The Aung San Suu Kyi and during a military government, there's a quite different on ideas. So some made the remark behind the president back. The Utain Singh is trying to give in the life to the already dead tiger.
A historic moment for Myanmar as the country's pro-democracy leader Aung San Suu Kyi is elected to parliament. The opposition National League for Democracy claims the Nobel laureate has easily won the majority of seats in her constituency just outside the city of Yangon.
I think some of the reformist ex-generals and the president at the time went a little bit beyond the script in terms of the liberalizations that took place, the freeing of political prisoners, the outreach to the NLD and Aung San Suu Kyi and others. And I think this tested the margins of what the establishment as a whole was probably also willing to tolerate. And so I think for those who wanted to push reform from within the government and from within the system, they also had to think about what might trigger a backlash. And no one was really quite clear what the whole game of politics was meant to be.
And so she arrived and took the steps into the corridors of power. But she wasn't prepared to start playing by the rules that deliberately excluded herself from power. She wanted to change the rules from within.
Pro-democracy leader Aung San Suu Kyi has taken her place in Myanmar's parliament, ushering in a new political era after years of military dictatorship. The Nobel Peace Laureate and other newly elected members of her party pledged to safeguard the constitution.
It's quite a change for a woman who's been incarcerated most of the last 20 years.
So when it arrived at the Instituto, a lot of media, I told them, hey, rebels are coming, rebels are coming. Well, actually, we are rebels, but we have struggled along so many years, nearly 3 decades. And they regard it as a above ground insurgents, not underground.
Aung San Suu Kyi and her party only hold 8% of seats in parliament, so at first glance they don't seem to have much leverage.
Our objective was to continue our struggle based on our political principles, to amend the constitution and to get truly democratic state.
I have a tremendous goodwill towards the military, so it doesn't in any way bother me to sit with them. I'm pleased to be sitting together with them.
But you would like to either reduce their presence or not have them in the parliament?
We would like our parliament to be in line with genuine democratic values. It's not because we want to remove anybody as such. Lack of confidence. If you have to pinpoint the greatest weakness, that's it, lack of trust and confidence. Nobody trusts anybody. This is a result of years and years of dictatorship, authoritarian rule. You always have to be careful. You don't know who's informing on whom. And this lack of trust has seeped into our very bones, in a sense. So this does not help to bring about reconciliation.
After 20 years in confinement, the people's leader had entered parliament. The air was filled with hope and anticipation. The world suspended the sanctions, and the country was lifted out of isolation for the first time in 50 years. It was a historic moment.
International community believe that we are ongoing trust on what we are moving on reform. That is, so wonderful. Even US President, Sir Hillary Clinton, and UK Prime Minister, and your, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, King Norway. And Japan, the whole people, the whole, president, prime minister, and also pay visit to Myanmar. That is a great change, the great changes in Myanmar. That is so important. Within a short time, it's very difficult to get trust within a short time.
Even American solution, American Tamara, Yamanaga Matakama Malahu, ကျွန်တော်လက်ထက်မှာအိုဘားမားနှစ်ချိန်ဒီလိုလာပါတယ်အဲ့တော့နိုင်ငံခြားနဲ့ဒီလိုပြည်လဲဆက်ဆံတဲ့အတွက်ကြောင့်ကျွန်တော်တို့အကျိုးကျေးဇူးကခုနကလိုအခွင့်အလမ်းတွေကျွန်တော်တော်တော်လေးရတယ်။စီးပွားရေးပိတ်ဆို့ထားတဲ့အတွက်ကြောင့်တိချက်ကလည်းဒီငွေကြေးတွေအစိုးရဆက်ဆက်မှာတင်ရှိနေတဲ့ကျွေးမြေတွေကိုကျွန်တော်တို့ကပြန်ပြီးတော့မဆက်နိုင်ဘူး။ကျွေးမြေတွေမဆက်နိုင်တဲ့အတွက်ကြောင့်အသစ်ခုနကလိုဒီအဖွဲ့အစည်းတွေပေါ့ World Bank လိုဟာမျိုးတွေနောက်ကဒီ IMF တို့ဟာမျိုးတွေ World Bank တို့ဘာလို့ကဘီလီယံနဲ့ချီပြီးတော့ကျွန်တော်တို့အကူအညီပေးတာတွေရှိတယ်
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Dasu, you helped set this country on a better path, and in the past 2 years, important changes have been made. The economy has begun to grow, political prisoners have been set free, there are more newspapers and media outlets, children have been released from the military, and these are all important changes that have opened up greater opportunity for the people of Burma. At the same time, it's clear how much hard work remains to be done and that many difficult choices still lie ahead. And as Burma approaches important national elections next year, it will be critical to ensure that all of Burma's people can participate in shaping the future of their country.
Well, I've always said that it's somewhat flattering to have a constitution written with me in mind, but it shouldn't be done that way. That's not how a democratic constitution should be written.
Now the current situation, that Aung San Suu Kyi has the power. Not only the power, she already has the Oza in Myanmar languages. Oza is, you know, the combination of the aspiration, motivation, love, respect. So this is a very powerful, what we call soft power. Sometimes the military leaders feel they are not well appreciated by the people of Myanmar and the international community because what they're doing for their country and what they are intended to move toward the democracy in our country.
While the leaders in white continued their efforts, the devil lied in the detail. In the sacred book, the Constitution, the military had stated that none of the generals could ever be prosecuted for sins of the past. Nor could any civilian government ever rule over the military. And they would keep the ministries of security, border and defense within their power. A quarter of the seats in parliament were reserved for the military to ensure that the book itself could never be changed without their will. Oh, and one last detail put in the book. Aung San Suu Kyi could never become the country's president.
Tururiga, Tongua, she said she can Sabiro, the Seana Shenega, Aung San Suu Kyi, and Amimu Senza Viroma, Aung San Suu Kyi, lower through Junji Sechabu Mishiwe. The cuckoo, the Apianle Pique now, they get time be a totate Samara, Mapia on Suviroma, Adi, and the township Poesibo Nema, da Poma Nazaku Salus, Tivi Chacha Tedore, Adi Usaga, Balesuro, Aung San Suu Kyi, Tamara Lulumia, Lutore.
I think one has to accept that there are some elements of the military who genuinely think that they're the only ones capable of keeping the country together. Now, this is not surprising because they were in power for more than 50. They have been, because they still are, in a sense, still in power because of the Constitution. The first military coup that established long-term military rule in Burma took place in 1962. So if you count it from then, it's over 50 years. After 50 years at the helm, then it's not very surprising that they got used to thinking that they were the only ones capable of keeping the country together.
Now, the new generation just yelling and shouting and demanding that you are our mother. We have no hope for our future with education and health, everything. So you are the savior. Please fight again, my mother. She has quite a lot of ability and efficiency and any other things make herself gradually with the esteemed leader, you see. She clearly declared that, I want to be president. I will be the president. She precisely already declared that already. But when you talk about the 59 or 82, but the most important thing is the F, because so simply marginalized also not to become the president.
As the book couldn't be touched by anyone but the military, Aung San Suu Kyi saw only one way of becoming the country's president: to talk directly to them and convince them to remove the clause. But nobody seemed interested in such talks. Only one man was willing to listen to her. Once the third highest-ranking general in the entire military dictatorship, Sri Man had expected to become president in the new democratic era. But when appointments were made by the outgoing dictator in 2010, he was bypassed when the grand posts were handed out. Sri Man was only given the position as Speaker of Parliament, and not even included in the president's cabinet. The attempt to sideline an ambitious man should turn out to cause unexpected troubles for the leaders in white.
Enemy of your enemy is your friend. I think that's what happened. He's a very smooth operator. He's a politician.
တစ်ဖက်က NLD နဲ့ပွားပြီးတော့ချိတ်ဆက်တာတွေဖြစ်လာတော့ကျွန်တော်ပါတီကအင်အားတော်လေးညော့သွားတယ်
He's thinking of personal agenda. He's thinking of those days he will become the president.
But up to now, Aung San Suu Kyi has a very few knowledge about how the government system is working, what happened in the last 20 years in the military and the government side. So I think whether he liked it or she liked it or not, she needed someone who have to share the knowledge and give the advice.
She's planning how to move, play with these strong people in the military. I think that she think that it will be workable with the Srimanship. But in the politics, there was no friend or no enemy at all, you see. At the time, sometimes we be friend, sometimes we be enemy. Sometimes hostility and sometimes friendship, okay.
Aung San Suu Kyi 2012ခုနှစ်ကြားဖြတ်ရွေးကောက်ပွဲဒေါ်အောင်ဆန်းစုကြည်အနိုင်ရရှိပြီးတော့တို့နဲ့ဒေါ်အောင်ဆန်းစုကြည်စပြီးတွေ့ခဲ့ပါတယ်သိခဲ့ပါတယ်သူ့အကြောင်းလည်းနားလည်ခဲ့ပါတယ် အဲ့လိုဆောင်ရွက်ဖို့ဆိုရင်သူနဲ့တို့နဲ့နိုင်ငံအတွက်အမျိုးသားအကျိုးစီးပွားအတွက်ဆိုရင်ပူးပေါင်းဆောင်ရွက်မယ်ဒီလိုလဲစိတ်ထဲမှာတန်ဋိဌာန်ချခဲ့ပါတယ်
Aung San Suu Kyi think the Ushuman can able to amend the Constitution 59F because to amend the Constitution you need at least one vote from the military. So I think Ushuman can deliver the result.
Ushuman agreed to discuss a motion in the parliament for the amendment of the Constitution.
Two in a lay, Nazaku Salomu, Pion Level, Nerun in a Mdama, 7 Salu, Abi Mule Pugawa.
President Chegan Uri at Lila Tonda Yi, Comedy, Prezi Bibi, Trosa Biro, Lila Tonda Livare.
President Nazaku Salomu, Yai Yasain Lemeswe, Aung San Suu Kyi, Agutamra Sure. Yarunia Yabiro.
Let's see what you change the ale. Nazaku Salonga 75% plus 1 ဖြစ်မှဒါဥပဒေကိုပြင်လို့ရမှာဖြစ်တဲ့အတွက်တက်မလို့ကတော့ 25% ပိုင်ဆိုင်ထားတာဖြစ်တဲ့အတွက်
It is impossible. 75% plus 25%. It is impossible. We know that it is impossible. He pretend to do that. I support you. I support you.
တကယ်အဓိကဟိုဟာတွေမဟုတ်ပါဘူးလို့နောက်ဒေါ်ဆန်းစုကြည်ဘက်ကလည်းသူ့ကိုသမရပေးမယ်လို့ဟိုဘာလို့ဆိုတဲ့ဥစ္စာကဒါတိတ်ပြီးတော့မှဟိုတေချာတဲ့ကိစ္စလည်းမဟုတ်ပါဘူးလို့
He knew that amending the constitution was impossible, but it would buy her loyalty. In the event of a future election victory, Aung San Suu Kyi would nominate the president, even if she couldn't become one herself.
The Sulutu Union Parliament continued its session in Naypyidaw on Thursday. Members of the parliament continued to discuss a section of the bill amending the constitution of the Republic of the Union of Myanmar.
40 years in the military life together with us. He betrayed to the military, so the whole world military corps didn't accept like that.
The amendment bill was not enacted. Parliament Speaker Thura Ushuman told the legislature after the 388 votes in favor of change fell below the threshold of 75% of lawmakers needed for it to pass.
But things didn't turn out his way. Having betrayed the military, he never got the chance to run for the presidency.
A အရေးကြီးတဲ့အချက်တွေကိုလည်းသူပြောင်းဖို့သူကြိုးစားရတယ်။အဲ့ဒါလိုလုပ်တဲ့အခါကျတော့ဒီတပ်မတော်နဲ့သူနဲ့ပဋိပက္ခဖြစ်တယ်ဆိုတဲ့အနေအထားရောက်လာတယ်။ရဲ့အကွဲအပြဲစစ်ဗိုလ်ချုပ်တွေကြားထဲမှာအကွဲအပြဲဆိုတာသူတို့သူဥစားသမိုင်းတစ်လျှောက်မှာဒီလိုမျိုးအကြီးကြီးမပေါ်ခဲ့ဘူး။
Uday Singh brought troops as well as police forces to the USB headquarters, and he accompanied the troop and ordered Shiman's people out.
The head of Myanmar's powerful ruling party has been ousted. Shui Man, who's also the Speaker of Parliament, is said to be effectively under some form of house arrest. Conservative forces strongly linked to the military appear to have made their move by replacing him.
And with regard to happenings in the middle of the night, this is not what you expect in a working democracy.
ဘာတွေဖြစ်ကြလဲဆိုတော့ကျွန်တော်ကတော့ဒီကိစ္စတွေကိုထဲထဲဝင်နေကျွန်တော်လှုပ်တာမရှိပါဘူးလို့ပါတီခေါင်းပိုင်းကလူကြီးတွေကနေပြီးတော့မှဒါကိုကျွန်တော်တို့ဖယ်ထုတ်ပြီးတော့မှပါတီရဲ့တာဝန်တွေကိုသူတို့ဆက်ပြီးတော့အပြောင်းအလဲတွေလုပ်တာပြုတာတွေရှိပါလေပထမတော့ကျွန်တော်ကတော့ဒီလိုပြောင်းလဲမှဖြစ်တော့မယ်ဆိုပြီးတော့ပါတီခေါင်းပိုင်းကအကြီးအကဲတချို့ကနေတော့စာနဲ့ရေးပြီးတော့တင်ပြကြပါတယ်ကျွန်တော်ထင်ပါတယ်အဲ့တော့12ရက်နေ့ကျွန်တော်တို့က12ရက်နေ့လားမသိဘူးနော်အဲ့တော့ညာတွင်းချင်းပဲပါတီရဲ့တာဝန်တွေကိုလွှဲပြောင်းပြီးတော့သူတို့ယူလိုက်တယ်
You know who did that? Although I don't know who ordered that transfer of power, my assumption is that old man, Senior General Tan Shui, is still influential. Nobody will think about that leadership change. He can only give that kind of order.
Behind the scenes, the old man was still pulling the strings. He had ruled the country with an iron fist for 2 decades. It was him that had put the sacred book in place and ordered democracy, and was now watching that every move was conducted in accordance with the script. Under his authority, the military enriched itself by exploiting the country's resources. He built a vast new capital and named it Naypyidaw, meaning the seat of kings. The day he stepped down, he divided his power in 2, appointing a commander of the army and a civilian president.
In this 2011, some senior leadership of the army, but nobody knew who will become a president. Nobody knew. When they were there, you became president. You became Speaker of the House. You became at the lower house, upper house, etc., etc. And Myanmar became the chief of staff.
As the spiritual guardians of the country, the monks and the astrologers had always had a powerful role in society and a vital say in all aspects of Burmese life.
Myanmar was different. He was chosen to lead the army because the old man checked his astrology. That's why he became the commander of the army, not his military proficiency. His stars are at the top.
The old man's biggest fear was the woman that had always been in his way. Even with her in house arrest, had he engaged 4 astrologers to foresee any threat that could come from her side. With 59F in place, had he finally released her. And only with that secure could his 7-step roadmap move forward to its final stage, to hold free and fair elections.
They chose the election date on November 8, 2015. One of the top astrologers advised. So if it was held on the 8th November 2015, you will win a landslide victory. But at that time, their survey of the whole country is that they will win handsomely.
ကျွန်တော်တို့ညီမှန်းတာတော့တရားရခဲ့နှုံးပဲ။နော်တရားရခဲ့နှုံးညီမှန်းတယ်။သို့တော်လည်းပဲတကယ်အခြေအနေမှန်ဆိုတဲ့ဥစ္စာတော့
But as you know, the result was quite the opposite.
By dusk, results were coming in thick and fast. In one big city, they captured 100% of votes. The party of the fighting peacock.
Aung San Suu Kyi and the people of Myanmar have waited 25 years, and the NLD, the National League for Democracy, her party, has won that crucial majority to get to this point today.
One of the top astrologers advised, but sometimes they are totally wrong. Losing the election, he went to a village and shaved his head and became a monk.
Even with the election victory safe, the battle was not over. So Aung San Suu Kyi wrote letters to meet the commander of the army and the president. But she got no replies.
ဒါပေမဲ့ဒီတိုင်းပြည်မှာကအဲ့လိုမဖေကြတဲ့ခါကျတော့ဒီအာဏာလွှဲပြောင်းရေးအဆင်ပြေပြေချောချောမွေ့မွေ့ဖြစ်အောင်ဆိုပြီးတော့မှဒေါန်ဆန်းစုကြည်ကဒီအာဏာရှင်ဟောင်းနဲ့ရောခုနကတော့တက်မတော်ကာကွယ်ဦးစီးချုပ်နဲ့ရောအဲ့ဒီချိန်ကသမ္မတဖြစ်နေသေးတဲ့ဦးသိန်းစိန်နဲ့ရောသူကတွေ့ဖို့ကြိုးစားတယ်တစ်ဖက်ကလည်းဟိုဘာပဲပြောပြောသူတို့ဟိုဆုံးဖြတ်ချက်ချထားတဲ့အတိုင်းလက်ခံတွေ့ဆုံတယ်အဲ့ဒါကအဲ့ဒီအချိန်မှာသူလုပ်ခဲ့ရတဲ့ဟိုကိစ္စတွေ
Weeks passed by. She wanted the keys to the kingdom, but the corridors of power were haunted by misdeeds of the past. For 70 years, vicious wars had been fought against the country's ethnic minorities. Wars that justified the military's existence as guardians of the sovereignty of the nation. Were she to get the throne, she would inherit a deeply wounded country. Then one day, she received an invitation. Not from the one she expected, but directly from the old man.
She was able to meet with Senior General Tan Shui. And there he admitted that you must be the leader of our future, something like that. We discussed that we hope that transition will be smooth. At the same time, we are expecting for the future government and in cooperation with the military commanders. We don't have any intention of reprisal or retaliation of the previous past events. We're just looking forward for the betterment of the people.
No, I think there's mostly about, maybe she want to guarantee the safety of the Senior General Tan Shui and the family. And also maybe General Tan Shui said he will also ready to accept the decision made by the people. I think there's something like the mutual interest on both sides.
With the blessing of the old man, suddenly everybody was ready to meet her and negotiate the conditions of a transfer of power.
Kaya sanit aku sanit piang ne kama kaya senza bawa luere lo matemba ne sanit hao cai de lu shi de democracy sanit de ko cai de lu shi de chance yo bo ma kwa thai ne lu shi de
da le chono di negotiation process dialogue process ဆိုတဲ့ဥစ္စာပါပဲ dialogue ကကောင်းပါလေဒီလိုမကြဒီလို dialogue လုပ်ပေးကြအဖြစ်မျက်နှာချင်းစုံတွေ့ခြင်းမဟုတ်တာတော့မှ dialogue process စတိုင်းသွားမယ်ဆိုလို့ရှိရင်တစ်ဖက်ကစိုးရင်စိတ်တွေတစ်ဖက်ကစိုးရင်စိတ်တွေကိုရှော့ချနိုင်မှာဖြစ်ပါတယ်
တချို့လဲဟလာရှိပါသေးတယ်ကျွန်တော်တော့ဒီလိုတော့အများကြီးမပြောလို့ပေါ့နာမည်တွေသူတို့ပွင့်လင်းရမှာကြောက်တယ်ဗျာသူတို့ပွင့်လင်းရမှာကြောက်တယ်တောင်ဝန်ခမ်းမှာကြောက်တယ်သူတို့ရဲ့နောက်ခံသမိုင်းကြောင်းကဒီကိုသူတို့သိကြောက်တယ်ဒါရှိမှာပေါ့လို့ဒီလိုလူတွေရတယ်
I don't think everybody in the military thinks like that, but certainly there are those who think like that. And there are those for whom it might be a matter of concern about the future, as you suggested. What will happen to them if there's a truly democratically elected government made up of those from parties other than one that they founded?
ဖွဲ့စည်းပုံအခြေခံဥပဒေကိုပြင်ဖို့အတွက်သူဆွေးနွေးပါတယ်တက်မတော်နဲ့တက်မတော်ကဒီကိစ္စကိုနှစ်တွဲမှာဒါကိုသူတို့မစင်စားသေးဘူးလို့ပြောပါတယ်
So you have to understand that there's two options for the LND government. The one is using all your energy and resources to fight to amend the constitution, especially the 95. Or you will work the first 2 years established in the trust between the military and the NLD. So I think Aung San Suu Kyi, she selected the second option.
All those who are in a position to change the course of the history of our country must agree at some point that we are going to take that path and not the other one.
She pledged she will work very closely with the military and the former official like the President U Thein Sein in the future affair of that state.
သူ့ဘက်ကလည်း short တင်တဲ့အပိုင်းကိုသူအများကြီး short ခဲ့ပါတယ်ဒါကြောင့်မလို့အခုဒီတက်မလို့ကနေသူ့ကိုလက်ခံရခြင်းဖြစ်ပါတယ်
The leaders in white stepped down and let Aung San Suu Kyi take their place. From now on, she would have to cooperate directly with the commander of the army, the military in its true colors.
So the main thing is both sides didn't want to rock the boat.
The election victory would finally be rewarded, and new colors filled the parliament. Aung San Suu Kyi could lead her party that now held a ruling majority, but could never become president. They would be sitting next to the military, who stayed to guard the book and kept key ministries within their power. It seemed that despite decades of struggle, she would be tied to them in ruling the kingdom. But then, they had always been bound together. In the 1940s, General Aung San led the fight for Burma's independence against the British colonial powers. The country needed unity and strength to gather on the inside and to protect itself on the outside. But it was no easy task, because the country was rich and varied. It had rivers and mountainous areas, hills and jungles, and a number of ethnic and religious people. Karen, Karenni, Chin, Kachin, Shan, Mon, Rakhine. Aung San proposed to unite all the country's people and founded Burma's Independence Army. By standing together, they could get the British out. And he succeeded.
It was at an early hour, specially chosen by Burmese astrologers, that Rangoon marked Burma's full assumption of independence. In place of the Union Jack, the Burmese national flag was hoisted with all due ceremony.
Shortly after, Aung San was brutally assassinated by political rivals. Wars broke out with the ethnic people. The people lost their founding father, but he had left them a military and a daughter.
She always mentioned that she was brought up in the hands of the NCOs around her father. He had to affection whoever is in the army, but they are still do not accept the rule of Aung San Suu Kyi. It's personal grudge. Well, as you know, since independence, when her father was assassinated, it was a known fact that he is the architect of our independence. He is the founder of Burma Army. So they were the sons or grandsons of Bojo Aung San. And then when military government took over, army is the father, army is the mother.
For now, they would share the kingdom and were tied together as brother and sister. But she wasn't going to give up her plan to unseat the military from the palace. After all, she was the true heir to the throne.
The Constitution bars her from becoming the president, but today she threw down the gauntlet to the Myanmar military.
The Constitution says nothing about somebody being above the president. I've said I'm going to be above the president. How? Oh, I've already made plans. Thank you very much.
Quite what she intends isn't clear, but the Constitution, she said, would not present an impossible obstacle.
တမတော်သားကိုယ်စားလှယ်တွေကမတက်ရက်ကန့်ကွက်ခဲ့ကြပါတယ်ရှင်။အဲ့ဒီနောက်ဥက္ကဋ္ဌဦးဝင်းမြင့်ကဒီဥပဒေကြမ်းကိုထောက်ခံသူများတာကြောင့်အတည်ပြုကြောင်းကြေညာပြီးတဲ့အထိသဘောမတူသူရှိပါသလားလို့မေးမြန်းရမှာတမတော်သားကိုယ်စားလှယ်အားလုံးကမတက်ရက်ပြီးကန့်ကွက်ခဲ့ကြပါတယ်။
Constitution of the state means that all the president, all the chief of the department, well under her control now. See, very wise step, you see.
And they accuse us, what is that? Democratic dictatorship. Bravo. I like the terminology.
Now she has come to the state, means control everywhere, every ministry.
She's like a tiger or a bull. She never let it go. It's credit to the late Ukoni. He was an expert in constitutional literature, so he lived through all the articles and he found one loophole that the president can create a position for anybody or any status.
အကြီးဆုံးနဲ့ပထမဦးစားပေးလုပ်ရမယ်ခရီးရတော့ဖွဲ့စည်းပုံအခြေခံဥပဒေပြုပြင်ပြောင်းလဲရေးပဲ
Well, I'll make all the decisions. It's as simple as all that. If I'm required to field a president who meets the requirements of Section 59F of the Constitution, all right, we'll find one.
This president will carry out whatever wishes he have at Aung San Suu Kyi. And even now, the president is schoolmate. And very simple, very soft man, and soft thinking, soft spoken. As the president, the president will carry out any sort of things to comply with her desire, you see. So she can want everything now, more than president now, you see. Now she can handle everything, you see. So that is why we cleverly move that can again able to carry out by Aung San Suu Kyi all of the powers, because we have a majority of the votes of the parliament, so we won.
Actually, she didn't have all the powers. While she had learned the game well and played by the rules, the military hadn't left the stage, and they responded with their language. Violence.
On Sunday afternoon, Myanmar state-run news MRTV reported that one of the government legal advisors to Aung San Suu Kyi was shot and killed by a sole gunman. Police have a suspect in custody.
Kony was shot dead at Yangon International Airport January 29th while holding his young grandchild.
Despite many unanswered questions regarding the murder of Kony, many here in Myanmar see it as a sign the government of Aung San Suu Kyi has yet to firmly establish the rule of law. The murder is also seen as a warning to those who want to reduce the power of the military. Police say his killer's motives weren't political, but one of his friends believes he was murdered because of his legal work.
We sense that he was hated by some people, but I didn't expect to that vicious. As if it is, actually it is a mafia. Still, the main culprit is still missing.
Kony was shot directly in the head in front of the Yangon International Airport. He was immediately taken to Yangon Hospital where he was pronounced dead.
Aung San Suu Kyi didn't attend the funeral. She stayed silent and withdrew from the public eye.
She's shrewd. She can guess the main reason. If she says something, it will get worse.
Was it some kind of warning for her that if you go too far?
Maybe.
But there was another problem with this lawyer. He was a Muslim. Back in 1947, when Aung San had united the country's ethnic people, one group was believed to have stayed on the British side. The ruling Buddhist majority agreed that they were traitors and that they did not belong in the country. The Muslim Rohingyas. The Buddhists called them Bengalis, considered people that had come from abroad.
Well, Rakhine was a time bomb that was ticking. So you had this rising Rakhine nationalist feeling, and where these two communities, Muslim and Buddhist, also began to see each other, not just began, but increasingly saw each other as their main enemies as well. And then you had, I think not surprisingly, the emergence in 2016 on the Muslim side, a new insurgency, and a very militant insurgency.
The group is poorly equipped. It has guns, small homemade bombs, and what it describes as a narrow mission to protect Rohingya Muslims.
The deep-rooted Rakhine conflict was toxic, and there were powerful interests at stake. To bring peace to the region and human rights to the oppressed people, Aung San Suu Kyi needed a powerful ally, and so turned to the international community for help.
You know, Kofi Annan, she invited Kofi Annan. So sometimes you have your family and your wife, your husband and your children quarreling in your home. You call all the people and look what happened. That sometimes it is a little bit difficult. You should do yourself first.
Tomorrow you will start traveling to the Rakhine. You will see for yourself what the problems on the ground are. You will be able to assess for yourself what the roots of the problems are. Not in one day, not in 1 week, but I'm confident that you will get there.
The Rohingya Muslims were stateless. Aung San Suu Kyi had promised to implement the findings of the commission, knowing that it would lead to citizenship for the Rohingya Muslims. What she couldn't know was that this was to become the Achilles heel of a lifelong project for peace and democracy.
Hundreds of people have rallied in Myanmar to denounce an advisory commission led by visiting former UN chief Kofi Annan. The Buddhist majority in Rakhine insists foreigners can't understand the region's history.
It's very narrow path to damage control that problems. It is big problems. For example, for our naval aspect, your ships hitting by the gun, no problem. Hit by torpedo, no problem. Hit by nuclear bombs, sorry. Now, after August 25th, nuclear bomb hit Myanmar.
စွန်းအကြမ်းဖက်သမားတွေဟာမောင်တော်ဒေသမှာမိရှို့ဖျက်ဆီးနေဆဲဖြစ်ပြီးနီးစပ်ရာလုံခြုံရေးကင်းစခန်းတွေကိုပြောင်းရွှေ့နေရဆဲဖြစ်ပြီး
Authorities say some 150 insurgents launched a series of raids on police posts in the early hours.
ဒီခုနကတော့သူတို့တွေကဒေါ်ဆန်းစုကြည်ဖြည့်ရှင်းပေးနေတဲ့ဟာကိုသူတို့တွေကမယုံကြည်ဘူး။ဘာဖြစ်လို့ဆိုတစ်ဖက်မှာတပ်မတော်ကလည်းဒါကိုလက်ခံမှာမဟုတ်ဘူး။တစ်ဖက်ကရခိုင်တိုင်းသားတွေလည်းဒါကိုလက်ခံမှာမဟုတ်တဲ့ခါကျတော့ဒေါ်ဆန်းစုကြည်ဖြည့်ရှင်းပေးနေတဲ့ဟာကိုသူတို့စိတ်မရှိဘူး။သူတို့မစောင့်နိုင်ဘူး။အဲ့တော့သူတို့ကအဓိကလိုချင်တာကနိုင်ငံတကာရဲ့ဝင်ရောက်ဆွတ်ဖက်မှုကိုသူတို့ကလိုချင်တယ်။နိုင်ငံတကာဝင်ရောက်ဆွတ်ဖက်မှုကိုရဖို့ဆိုရင်သူတို့ကဒီလိုမျိုးတိုက်ခိုက်မှုတွေလုပ်မှာပဲသူတို့ကရမှာ
Rohingya fighters attacked army and police posts in Rakhine State on Thursday night. Just hours earlier, former UN Secretary-General Kofi Annan had announced the findings of a year-long investigation into the mistreatment of the Rohingya minority in Myanmar.
Just one day after Kofi Annan had delivered the final report, the attacks had captured the agenda, and any plan to give citizenship to the Rohingyas had been disrupted. For the military, the situation provided an opportunity to respond and to get rid of a problem altogether.
The army has begun what it calls clearance operations to root out Rohingya fighters.
The brutal Burmese military operation against Rohingya Muslims is at risk of spiraling into an ethnic cleansing campaign as the violence against the long persecuted minority group continues.
The Burmese response was to close the area, and the army began what it called clearance operations. Civilians as well as militants have been targeted.
Army has its own agenda without our knowledge, without consulting us. They have the right to do anything what they like. They can do what they like. We cannot interfere or order them what to do.
The UN says almost 150,000 Rohingyas have fled the predominantly Buddhist country into neighboring Bangladesh in the last 12 days since the military operation began.
The current situation cannot yet be fully assessed, but the situation remains or seems a textbook example of ethnic cleansing.
She had invited the international community in. Now they expected her to respond and to condemn the military. The one thing she couldn't do. She had accepted to work under the Constitution, which gave her no power over military affairs. The consequences of that deal were now being realized. But as the crisis worsened by the minute, her immediate response was denial.
I'm deeply disappointed and saddened by the disinformation campaign being waged around the world with regard to the situation in Rakhine. These fabricated news items are written and published with the intent to mislead the public.
Aung San Suu Kyi, the country's leader, said the situation in Rakhine State was being distorted by what she called a huge iceberg of misinformation.
The kind of things blew up in our face without any expectation.
The government has rejected accusations that the armed forces are conducting a campaign of indiscriminate violence targeting Rohingya Muslims.
Ministry of Interior, Home Ministry, Defense and border areas are controlled by the army. So when the kind of thing happened, international community blamed Osu that she was protecting the army. The reason was that she doesn't want to make any hostile remark to the army for the long run. But she was blamed for that. That's why they call it military trap.
Nobel Peace Prize laureate Aung San Suu Kyi, who is now Burma's de facto president, is facing mounting criticism for her handling of the violence. Last year, she
and Nobel Peace laureate Aung San Suu Kyi has blamed terrorists for what she termed, quote, a huge iceberg of misinformation.
Amounts to ethnic cleansing. Suu Kyi herself won the Nobel Peace Prize.
Nobel Peace Prize winners has sharply criticized Myanmar's leader Aung San Suu Kyi for not doing enough to protect the country's minorities.
She's seeking to deflect the Rohingya crisis that's so far sent almost 150,000 Rohingya Muslims fleeing.
She should use her voice, that's true, and she hasn't, and that's deeply disappointing. Silent and in many cases complicit in messaging on this issue.
I think when you get power, you go into a cocoon. You go into an us against them attitude.
I think Aung San knows, that senior general Aung San knows the problem, and then she's enjoying the situation.
While Aung San Suu Kyi had put herself above the president, there was one man who was ultimately above them all, the commander of the army. The commander of the army was accountable to no one but the commander of the army. He held the monopoly on violence and could take back full power of the country whenever he liked, as history had proven. For the military, the situation was not a crisis. It was an opportunity to bring her down.
Myanmar တပ်မတော်နဲ့တရားသောစစ်အောင်မြင်စေကြောင်းထောက်ခံပွဲကိုဒီဇင်ဘာလ18ရက်နေ့မွန်းလွဲပိုင်းကရန်ကုန်မြို့တော်ခမ်းမအနီးမဟာဗန္ဓုလပန်းခြံရှိမှပြုလုပ်ရာမြန်မာတပ်မတော်နဲ့တရားသောစစ်အောင်မြင်စေကြောင်းထောက်ခံပွဲပြုလုပ်မဲ့မြို့တော်ခမ်းမအနီးမဟာဗန္ဓုလပန်းခြံရှိသို့ချီတက်လမ်းလျှောက်ခဲ့ကြပါတယ်
Many Burmese they hate Bengali or what they call Rohingya they hate it. So if you involved in this case, that means you show you supported Rohingya. So she may keep silent on this thing. Maybe in the future she worry she will not get a vote or maybe that kind of thing. Maybe.
While the military kept the conflict rolling, the outside world demanded clear answers from the state leader. From their front row seats in the audience, the military watched her enter the scaffold.
After intense pressure, Aung San Suu Kyi finally addressed the Rohingya refugee crisis.
This televised address to diplomats was Ms. Suu Kyi's chance to state her case to the world.
It is not the intention of the Myanmar government to apportion blame or to abnegate responsibility. We condemn all human rights violations and unlawful violence. We are committed to the restoration of peace, stability, and rule of law throughout the state. The government has been making every effort to restore peace and stability and to promote harmony between the Muslim and Rakhine communities. I'm aware of the fact that the world's attention is focused on the situation in Rakhine State. But we would like you to think of our country as a whole, not just as little afflicted areas.
တိုင်းဝိုင်းကတော့ဒါရိုဟင်ဂျာတွေကိုစာနာပါတယ်ဒီဥစ္စာတွေဘယ်လိုဖြစ်ပါဒါမျိုးကြားကျင်ကြတယ်ဒါပေမဲ့ကျွန်တော်ထင်တယ်ဒီလိုဟာမျိုးက तू ပြောလို့မဖြစ်ဘူးဘာဖြစ်လို့လဲဆိုတော့အဓိကဒီတိုင်းပြည်ထဲမှာ तू ရေရှည်အလုပ်လုပ်နေရတဲ့ဟာကတပ်မတော်ရှိတယ်
Aung San Suu Kyi has made her choice. Her relationship with the military and the stability of her government comes before the Rohingya and what's left of her international reputation.
Her long-term vision to get the military out of politics seemed further away than ever. Yet, she had decided to stay on the inside and persevere. As the daughter of the founding general of the army, she was born with a destiny to lead the country and the military. In that sense, she was ultimately above them all.
Those prominent qualities of Aung San Suu Kyi was that she was honest, straightforward, sometimes too quick to respond. Well, that's her nature. In some cases, she became mature. Her attitude to everybody, she wanted to be a mother to them. During 1988, she was sometimes impulsive, but politically very wise. When I watched her movement and speeches and everything, dealing with the people, I became impressed. I thought myself she could become a leader of the country. She assumed herself as a mother. So she tried to formulate how to treat them, how to communicate with them, whether general or ethnic people or whoever he may be. Her attitude is she doesn't want to take action against anybody. She would like to give some kind of lessons, and she would like to change their attitude with moral leadership. Everybody is equal in her own assumption, but it depends on their feedback. It's good, it's quite all right. It's bad, she will try to control him, or she won't take action against him. She will try to tame him patiently.
She grew up amongst the generals, so she spoke the language they knew in order to tame them, change their military minds, to stop them thinking like dictators. But while they continued their struggle over who would be true heir to the throne, the head of the family, the King of Kings, it happened, like in any family, that even the fiercest of foes end up looking more alike than they differ. Like brother, like sister.
Ten lanes there, 10 lanes here, it's 20 lanes. You can drive closing your eyes. Very funny. Do you know where they live? Tan Shui and previous military commanders, and also Aung San Suu Kyi. Well, I'll show you. They stay with the full security details. Huge mansions. This is the place. Aung San Suu Kyi is also here. Hiroshima here, and to the president house there. Well, she stays in a house that is meant for the ministers. On each mansion there, about 3 acres.
They all live in the same place?
Yeah, immediate neighbors.
Behind closed doors, far away from the people and the world, they kept their fight on going, all the while the country was falling apart at the seams.
The entire area has been burned out. The residents are evidently all gone. You know, it shows a clear swath of destruction, presumably caused by arson.
These satellite images from Human Rights Watch show the extent of the destruction there.
It shows that, once again, the government of Burma does not have the situation under control.
The fact-finding mission has concluded, on reasonable grounds, that the patterns of gross human rights violations and serious violations of international humanitarian law that it has found amount to the gravest crimes under international law: genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes.
The main perpetrator of the serious human rights violations outlined in our report, including of the acts of sexual violence, is the Myanmar military. We are deeply disappointed that State Councillor Aung San Suu Kyi has not used her position or her moral authority to stem, prevent, or condemn the unfolding events in Rakhine State.
Let me be clear, Mr. President. There is no ethnic cleansing. There is no genocide. The leaders of Myanmar, who have long been striving for freedom and human rights, will not espouse such policies.
The outside world can choose the issues on which they wish to focus. We who are living through the transition in Myanmar view it differently from those who observe it from the outside, and who will remain untouched by its outcome. For us, it is the broad, all-encompassing map of the future of our country, as well as the small details of our everyday life.
I think the country is in an emergency situation. I think that we have a country of endemic ethnic and religious conflict, one of the poorest countries in the region, opening up to the world. The crisis has been devastating. It's had a knock-on effect on the possibility of transition as a whole. The feeling on the outside that the government has not responded in anything like a satisfactory way has led to an intense cooling of relations between the international community through the United Nations with the Myanmar government. We're still living in a world of more or less exactly the same mentalities that had existed before, and it extends way beyond the army. I mean, you know, like it or not, I mean, army rule has been around for longer than I've been alive. I mean, for more than well over 50 years, half a century. So it's not just the army, it's everything else has been shaped by army rule. And so it's not a country which was democratic 5 years ago and can snap back to democratic practices. Everything has to start with where we were a few years ago, under army rule, but again on the tail end of 7 decades of violent conflict as well.
The 8,333rd meeting of the Security Council is called to order. The provisional agenda for this meeting is the situation in Myanmar.
The massive refugee emergency that began 1 year ago in Rakhine State, Myanmar, has become one of the world's worst humanitarian and human rights crises.
The world can no longer avoid the difficult truth of what happened in Burma.
The population of Rakhine State was subjected to a campaign of
worst catastrophes in our modern history,
resulting in grave violations of their human rights and indeed expulsion.
Have led to the displacement of some 900,000 people of Rohingya.
Police went from house to house.
Reports of systematic and widespread human rights violations and abuses against the Rohingya community in Rakhine State.
I now give the floor to the representative of Myanmar.
Mr. President, our gathering here today could have been a different one had there been no terrorist attack. It could have been a happier occasion to stock-taking, implementation of the Rakhine Advisory Commission, or an international pledging conference to help poverty alleviation. And so, sorry. And socio-economic development of all communities in Rakhine. The provocative terrorist attacks of October 2016 and August 2017 have affected the cause of our earnest endeavor to build a peaceful, fair and prosperous future for the people of Rakhine. But nothing shall stop our determination to continue our effort to achieve our objective.
So this is what it came to. Despite so much hope, they couldn't make it. Perhaps she was never who the world thought she was. Neither the villain the world sees her as now. History is never over. But for the story I have told you, this is, unfortunately, the end.